how I got my Lotus Elise. All right, it was a real ordeal, but it was worth it. The story begins where I first began to have eyes for the Lotus when I was in high school. The Elise first showed up in the US in 2005, and there was a lot of articles and magazine articles written about it. One of my dad's employees at the time was talking about it really excitedly one day, talking about how lightweight it was, 4 strong guys could pick it up and move it. From then on, I dreamed of owning one someday. So I downloaded pictures, read up on specifications, and even calculated monthly payments for whatever limited knowledge I had at the time of how to finance a car. I didn't truly know the true ownership costs at the time, but I decided at some point that it would be one of my bucket list items to own a Lotus Elise before the age of 25, quarter life century. Yeah, at many points my mom tried to bribe me to do well, to do better in school. If you get straight A's, she said, throughout college, I'll buy you a Lotus Elise when you graduate. And so it didn't really happen that way. I figured at the end of sophomore year, it was mathematically impossible for me to get straight A's through my college career. So that didn't happen. But I rarely... but once in a while I did, maybe like once a year or once every other year, saw a Lotus Elise in person, and every time I'd be super excited. I'd take tons of pictures on my grainy smartphones at the time, and I loved how they looked, and I still wanted one. So as I began my career after college, I kept it in the back of my mind that, maybe one day I'll purchase one. And I became more and more of an auto enthusiast until one day my boss invited me to go to a track day with him. And I excitedly agreed, right? That'd be awesome to just like work on track stuff and look at cool cars, and who wouldn't want to go to a track day, right? I went on my first track day experience as a spectator, as a guest, helping him pit his car and all that stuff. And there just so happened to be a woman there, a student at the time, driving a Lotus Elise SC. I drooled over it. Every time I got an opportunity, I would walk over and walk around and look excitedly at it. And in one of her short breaks, she asked if I wanted to drive it when she went to go get gas. Of course I said yes. So we went out to go get gas. I drove it for the first time I ever drove a Lotus, and she kept telling me to floor it, it likes to be revved. I didn't even get close to going over 4,000 RPM. Didn't hit the second cam at all, didn't even get close, but it was enough for me. I knew at that point I needed to get a Lotus Elise. Fast forward, and now I'm 24 years old. I'm figuring out that, okay, I'm 24. If I want to get one before I'm 25, this is the year, I guess, right? So I began my research. I was looking for cars somewhat local to me that I could drive to go and take a look at. Perusing Lotus Talk forums and Auto Trader, Cars.com at the time. And I did a lot of research into the financing aspect. I knew that I had to get an auto loan. I had to get approved, payments, interest, and all that stuff. So I opened an account at my local credit union, and I got a great rate, and I got pre-approved for a used car loan. And I talked to them and I asked them, what do I need to do to purchase a vehicle? And they told me I needed a bill of sale, a signed title, and that would have the VIN number, the price, and all that stuff. So I got the paperwork ready, called up 2 owners of cars I saw. One was a red one with a black interior, and then one was a gray one with a red interior. And I thought it was kind of funny that the exterior and interior were sort of closely reversed. There weren't any black ones at the time. I wanted to get a black exterior one, but there weren't any in my location range or price range. And to be honest, I was less hung up on the color than just owning a good example. So I was super excited, but the day of, I found out that the guy with the red one ended up selling it before I got to see it. And I called up my cousin, and we drove down together to go go down to Pennsylvania to go see the gray one. Ready to give him a deposit just in case, bill of sale, and I prayed to God for a favorable outcome and went down to go see it. When I arrived, I knew it was the one because I took it for a test drive. I asked the seller why he was selling the vehicle, and it turned out it was his fourth car. He already had a 911 as his daily, and he had a Boxster as his track car, or a Cayman, and on top of his wife's SUV. And his wife told him he couldn't have 4 cars and he had to get rid of one of them. So the Lotus it was. And yeah, lucky for me, because the Elise was in great shape. Had 5,400 miles on it, very minor cosmetic issues. It was missing the clear bra, but it had the hardtop and the soft top, and it had the LSS Sport and Touring packages. So I negotiated the price with him, and yeah, I gave him the deposit, had the paperwork, bill of sale signed, and yeah, I got home. I was exhausted, but I was extremely excited until I called up the credit union. So I had called up the credit union because I had to give them all the information on the car so they could get the check ready, right? But when I gave them the VIN number and the make and model, I was asked if I had gotten an appraisal. So I panicked, as I hadn't heard about any appraisal when I first asked about it. And the credit union rep told me because it was a rare, exotic car, I would need to get an appraisal. I didn't get a wink of sleep that night. I was tossing and turning. I was just freaking out. And in the morning, I started calling appraisal companies and trying to figure out who I could get an appraisal from. I hadn't done it, and I had already signed the bill of sale, which is technically a legal document, and I said I would buy the car. And so I was feeling worse and worse and worse about it until one of my coworkers suggested, why don't you just try another credit union or a financial institution? So I called up another credit union right down the road and found out that they actually had better rates and they didn't require an appraisal. Trust me, I asked multiple times. So I was relieved and I began the finance process but the next unpleasant surprise would soon come when I began to inquire about auto insurance. I called every single big name company out there, Geico, Progressive, Allstate, all these companies, even the collector ones like Haggerty and all that. Nobody would offer me insurance either for that type of car or to someone so young. The collector cars wouldn't offer anyone under 25. So I was thinking, oh, curses. Why did my bucket list arbitrarily decide to acquire this car at this age, right? So I ended up going through a private broker, which they got me a policy that I ended up having to pay $1,800 for a year, but at least it was insured. I disgustingly agreed. I had little choice in the matter, and I sent off my first payment. But I had something to look forward to, picking up the Lotus Elise. So I asked my boss, who was the track nut, and I asked him if he could help me pick up the car with his trailer. He gladly agreed. So we went down to pick it up, check in hand. We picked up the car, and I said my goodbyes to the owner. And boy, did he look pretty sad when we began loading it up on the trailer. So we drove it back up, and it actually snowed during the time we were driving up. And I kept glancing back at it in the mirror, and I had this stupid, goofy grin on my face. And it wouldn't go away. So I got it home safely, washed it, started it up, sat in it, revved it, drove it up and down my driveway, took pictures, and I just kind of enjoyed that new car experience. But of course, that wasn't the end of it. I got a phone call from my insurance broker saying that the insurance company declined the policy when they went to underwrite it. And effectively, I had no coverage. I freaked out again, right? But the insurance agent assured me it's okay. They found an alternative one, Travelers. They would assuredly underwrite a policy for me, I asked. But they would charge me $2,700 a year. I was floored. My insurance had gone up nearly $1,000, but I had no choice in the matter. So I agreed. It was all worth it, right? That's what I said. So I took the next day off of work to get the plates, get it registered, and I got there early. And as I got my ticket called, the clerk at the DMV told me that they couldn't register my car because the title hadn't been notarized. And they said because it had been purchased from out of state, that title needed to be notarized. So panic set in again, and I frantically called the seller, asking them if they could meet me that day to get the title notarized. Thankfully, he agreed and told me that there was a notary at his workplace that could do it. So I flew down in my car as fast as I could, met him in Pennsylvania at his workplace, got the title notarized, to which I thanked him profusely. So I floored it back up to New York to another DMV that was open late that day, and finally got my registration, my temporary inspection sticker, and I got my license plates, to my relief. But of course the drama didn't end there. I ended up getting a phone call from Travelers a week later asking about my sister, who was living in the household, as she was a licensed driver and I was living at home at the time. They told me my sister had to be put under my policy as she was a licensed driver, even though I argued that she was in college and at the time she didn't even drive manual transmission. I told them there was no way in hell I would ever let her drive my car. And I even told them she doesn't drive stick, she doesn't drive manual. But they told her they had to add her to my policy regardless. And frustratingly, I asked, all right, how much is it going to cost me? And they told me, oh, only another $400. Then they had the nerve to ask me if there were any other licensed drivers in the household, to which I angrily told them no. I didn't tell them about my younger brother, who was technically not licensed at the time, but he did have his permit. But I had it. There was no way I was going to get ripped off that bad, and I got desperate. I ended up calling all the insurance companies again, Geico, Allstate, Esurance, and all of these companies, and I was pleading with them to find a way to insure me. It ended up being Geico, surprisingly, a nice representative who I ended up talking to. He knew what the Lotus Elise was, and he knew it wasn't some super high-end exotic like a Ferrari or Lamborghini, but that it was priced and powered more like a nice Honda S2000. So he ended up talking to his manager, and I ended up getting a policy started, and it ended up costing $1,400 a year. I was ecstatic.